Dudes to Dads is a podcast to help men understand and navigate the transition of being a single dude into a family man. How do we make sense of it all? Well, we probably won't be able to, but let's go ahead and have some fun trying. And we are back.
We are back.
I'm Jason Kreidman.
I'm Alan Bush.
And this is Dudes to Dads. Alan, it is the 100th episode.
That's crazy.
Can you believe that?
We are now 100 in.
What you called it something?
Centurion.
Yes. Something like that.
That's the official 100th word.
I thought there would be no better way to celebrate the 100th episode than to bring in my dad.
That's perfect.
So I thought it would be just not only for selfish reasons to be able to record this and have this for documentation, kind of like I did with my son.
Yeah.
But I think the insight from somebody of a different generation and some of the experiences that he's had, I thought could really lend some valuable information to our listeners. So
for sure. And raising you.
Yeah, well,
you were a challenge. Right?
We won't talk about that. I don't want to get too into my own issues, but yeah. But no, I think there's some insight and some interesting stuff. I wanted to kind of, do some history as well and some context.
Yeah.
First, I can call you Dad, Steve. You can say hello. Yeah.
I prefer Dad.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So to give a little bit of context, so my father was married, and we'll talk about this, but was married for 45 years.
Yeah.
And my mother passed away 5 years ago, and we've talked a lot about her on this podcast about her programs, Light His Fire and Light Her Fire.
That's right.
And so my father, who was involved with selling those, continues to sell the programs, be involved in the business.
Cool.
So that's one of the things too. So
carry on the legacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we'll put a link to the website, drellenkreidman.com. We'll put a link to it. The cool part now is, he's now in a new marriage, wonderful, wonderful woman. And it's really been great to see that kind of, that new evolution. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
There you go.
It's just, it's completely different, but yet wonderful.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
so I wanted to just give some context of kind of where, he's at and so that we can, kind of talk about the experiences that he's had, what he's gone through, and then hopefully, gain some insight.
Yeah, for sure.
So welcome. I just want to welcome you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for
Just
coming.
any excuse to see you again is good. So,
driving all the way in the rain in sunny California.
And also to give you some idea too, so he's a father of 3. So I have 2 older sisters.
Right.
And then a grandfather of 8, correct?
Yes.
That's I want to make sure I don't miss out on any of them that you know of. That's right. 3 children.
As far as I know, there's 8.
Right. So first, just kind of starting off, just some background and some context. So how old are you, or when were you born?
Should I really tell you my real age?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm 72.
72. Okay. So born in 44.
Yeah,
we can
1944.
Get some so 1944.
Good.
And so how would you describe your childhood? I know it's hard to sort of in a short amount of time to do that, but in general, sort of in context, how would you describe your early life and your early childhood?
Well, I was kind of a loner. Okay, so I was pretty much by myself for quite a few years. Not very outgoing. And
so this is late 40s, early 50s kind of, late 40s, yes. I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you had a sister.
I have a sister that's 3 years younger than I am.
Okay. And as a as a child and your childhood, was it something that you look back with fond memories, or is it something that you kind of just it was then and you forget about it?
Well, there were some fond memories, but overall, if I have to be honest, we got married very young, and immediately left
as soon as you could. You got out.
Leave the New York area and go to California. So we tried to get as far away from the family on both sides. So you could say I guess I could say that it wasn't the greatest being in the house because it was difficult. It was difficult to deal with everything that was going on.
So, and at those times, did you have a lot of other family around, or was it just your nuclear family? I mean, it was your father, your mother, and then your sister.
Yes.
That was it. So it was just kind of, there wasn't a lot of family around, if you will.
That's how I grew up as well.
Not that was close around. We had to go maybe an hour by car to get to somebody that, one of the relatives.
And would you say that you were close to your parents? I mean, is that something that like you can identify with? Did you feel like you were close?
No.
Hence why you left.
It was mostly telling me what I was doing wrong most of the time.
Okay.
And I was a little jealous of my sister because I always got, I was, not.
You weren't a bad kid though.
No, I wasn't I didn't think I was a bad kid.
But your parents kind of treated you that way.
But my parents were, I guess they just thought that I should be better than I was, Yeah. So I was really, my sister was goody two shoes and, really, did well. Never got hit, never got yelled at.
But you never felt like then that you, I mean, I'm taking the assumption that you never felt like you could do right then. I mean, it was almost like no matter what you did, you were in that environment where like nothing was ever good enough.
It was negative. It was basically pretty negative. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So that's some context too. I want to kind of understand because the environment, and I wonder too, if, it's not that people back then had all bad families or all good families, but I'm wondering too of those times that it was more common. There was sort of the roles were very distinct where the woman was at home, the husband is out working and worked a lot.
Yeah.
There was sort of that, it was a very different time. I mean, you think about like the late 40s and what was going on.
A lot of times
when
we talk about traditional, it usually is referring to that type of time.
Right.
So, yeah.
So the types of things that we talk about on this podcast are not things that were probably dealt with back then.
Right. Yeah.
It just wasn't thought of.
Absolutely.
So you kind of went through childhood and of course, like you said, it wasn't wonderful. There's certainly things where you, like you said, you're not feeling close to your parents. How old were you when you first got married? You were out of high school, right? You were in college?
Yes. Well, I met my wife when we were both 17.
Okay.
And we got married at 22.
22. Okay.
So.
All right. And so what age were you? So you're 22. What age were you when you had your first child?
Actually 25.
Okay.
Was that first.
25. Okay. Mm-hmm. So
we were already in California by that time. So.
Okay. So my older sister is 5 years older than me, and then my other sister is 4 years older.
Okay, so back to back almost for the two girls.
One year and 4 days.
I happen
apart.
to be the surprise. At least that's how Mom always put it. It wasn't a mistake. You were a surprise. So I grew up thinking that I was the or what did she? I
Golden
forget
child.
Yeah, I forget what she said, but it was the blessing.
The blessing.
I was the blessing.
Gotcha.
Right. So I want to get into a little bit, if you can remember some of the early years. So you now have these you're at the time 2 kids, let's say. You've got 2 kids, or even before that. Do you recall the time where you found out that you guys were pregnant and you were about to have a baby? Do you remember that time?
Yes, I mean we did find out that we were going to have a baby.
Were you trying? I mean, that was...
Yes, we were trying. We definitely were trying, and it finally worked. And
were you? Did you anticipate it positively? I mean, so it was something you were excited about, or were you kind of scared about it, or you didn't, or indifferent?
I was pretty clueless. I mean, I think your mother was more focused on having children. I was okay with it, but it was basically because that's what she wanted.
Okay.
And I didn't really think about children until they
were there.
Until the first one was born, my oldest daughter, Tara. And once I saw her come out of the womb, it was absolutely amazing. It totally changed my view. She had big cheeks, and she was almost 9 pounds,
big kid.
And a beautiful little child, So I was very, very happy.
So it's interesting because that guys will talk about that, like they don't really know, because if you've never experienced it, you don't really know what it's like.
Yeah,
you don't know what to expect, and then it happens, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, I'm kind of changed. Like, and like you said, I mean, this was an experience you just had no clue.
Yeah,
you weren't even really focused on it. You're kind of like, okay, I know the baby's coming, but it's not reality. Until it's there, it's a very interesting. So
that's a motif. I hear that from almost every new dad.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I can relate to the same thing. It wasn't so real. I mean, granted, you can see a sonogram or something like that, but like, it really isn't real until you're sitting there and the baby's in front of you and you're holding it or whatever. You can't believe that you did this. Like you were a part of this.
We created.
At least you hope so.
Yeah,
you hope that it's yours. Somebody else's baby. Then that's a problem. But so you had at the time, and going back, you had 2 kids, let's say in diapers. How active do you remember? Or did you feel as a dad? Like, were you changing diapers? Were you bathing?
It was so much fun changing diapers.
But did you remember that was a part of it?
No, that was not a good part. I did it. Because
she said to do it?
My wife, your mother needed help.
Yeah. And
so I tried my best and didn't really enjoy it. But, it had to be done. It had to be done,
Sure.
So would you say that you were active at that time? I mean, you were, playing with the children. It wasn't like you were just so focused on work and say, well, it's mom's job to do that,
I did think it was mom's job, but
that was her because you were working.
Overwhelming to have 2 babies, one a year old, and one a few days old. So it was very tough. Because they were crying constantly.
Yeah,
they did. And my oldest daughter, Tara, had a really loud voice. And
where did she get that?
Good set of lungs.
We all, the entire Kreidman clan.
We used to put her in a room and then put on the radio really loud so we didn't have to hear her crying. But because she had a lot of problem with her stomach or whatever. So colic, yeah. And but it was interesting because this was a new thing for us to deal with, and
you were still kind of all alone. I mean, you didn't really have the family at that time.
Yeah, we didn't have really much in the way of
Your
friends.
Your parents weren't around very much at that time, or no?
No, they were 3,000 miles away.
You started your family when you moved to California.
When we moved to California,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when we had our first child, we then got. We then said, wow, we should go back east, and so we did go back east. We stayed back east 2 years, and then came back to California.
You're spoiled.
Done with that, yeah.
I think we needed to be far away again.
Did you? So in being an active father at that time, or what you felt was active, was that the norm, or was that something that you felt? Was your peers or the other people around you? Did you feel that Did you notice a difference? Like, were you more involved versus? Because let's say the common stereotype that I would think of back then was that the father wasn't as active in the rearing and then part of the nurturing and feeding and bathing and like we're talking about in the baby and diaper stage, more that like that's the woman's job. Like that's what I think about when I.
Well, certainly it was the woman's job just because. Your mother couldn't work any longer with 2 little children. So she was a teacher, and then she decided I'm going to be full time, taking care of the kids.
Yeah.
And so I was working. So when I came home, I try to help. Yeah, I try to help, and I'd get a list of things that.
Well, she wasn't shy about asking for help,
which she was not just shy.
So some, and that's a thing too with that we talk about it. We've said, like, when your wife has the baby, it's taking the initiative for many men to actually just ask, hey, what can I do? Because it's weird, but there's a lot of women who don't ask for help, and they think, well, I don't want to bother him, or I can handle it myself, or whatever. And the truth is that there's a lot of men that just don't even know what to do. And so they're not going to just go and ask, like, hey, honey, how can I make it easier for you? They're not going to ask that question, So that's kind of interesting too, is like to take the initiative back then,
right,
and be like, but also I know that mom was, hey, here's a list of things I need you to do. Go ahead and here's your tasks for the day. Right. So I can imagine that was
there were things that I again didn't know what I was supposed to do, but if there were. Again, she was overwhelmed with two little ones. So, we try to, deal with the food and pablum or whatever. And I was just asking her to say, okay, what else can I do? Yeah. Can I guess I can do some laundry. Right. I can do some cleaning.
So you were helpful then.
I was trying to help, No,
that's good.
And if I didn't help, I would hear about it.
That's funny. And so as children, we got a little bit older, let's call it, elementary school age and stuff. I recall, getting involved in sports, and that was a big part of my dad and my interaction, if you will, is, at least in my memory, is, I started competitive swimming at age 5.
Oh, wow.
So I was in swimming sort of before that, but I remember being in a swim team and competitive. And I know, because he was a swimmer. And so that became something that as a family, we were really involved with, and we've talked about that. And I was it was a lot of hours and a lot of dedication and stuff. So were you deliberate in that participation and saying, like, okay, hey, I want my kids to be active in this. And that was something where you could participate and be a part of it. Because I think that's common for dads. They're kind of like, okay, well, I don't know how to really connect in some ways, or I don't know what else to do, but I know that I love this. I'm going to have my kids do that, or something to that effect.
I wanted to encourage them. They like you said, you started at 4 or 5, and your sisters were 4 or 5 years older than you. So it started with them, and then they started to, get better at what they were doing. And sure enough, you came along, and so when you got to that age, we said, okay, and now it's going to be 3 of you doing swimming. Yeah. That didn't last forever, but for a while we were going almost every weekend.
Yeah, I mean it was a lot of commitment.
A lot, going to a team, to a different location.
And I remember the dedication. I remember.
Travel.
I look at it now as a parent. Like, I wouldn't want to do what they did.
Yeah.
As like the amount of time that it took up, and we've talked about that too, is where I saw, they were at the, especially him, not necessarily my mom, and he was at every meet, always involved, and that was, I remember that, and that was a big part of my childhood of knowing, oh, he's going to be there. I didn't even remember questioning it. It was just like, he'll be there. And, I think it'd be really strange when you weren't there. If anything, you set up the expectation like you're going to be at everything and every event, which you got to be careful of as a parent. But I see that now as with me being a parent of like, wow, that was so much dedication. Because I think about my weekends now, like I work during the week.
Yeah.
I see my kids, whatever. So I guess if that was the interaction I had, that would be cool. But it doesn't leave very much free time. Like that is your free time. Right. That is the family activity. I remember because we would travel places together. So it was a group activity. Yeah. But it was a lot of time.
Yeah.
A lot of time.
But I absolutely loved it because I could see all of you growing and doing better over time, getting faster at the,
we were quite competitive,
doing different strokes. Obviously, that was trying to get the children to be able to do butterfly, backstroke, freestyle,
So you saw the progression. I mean, you saw the progression, and that's exciting as a parent. I can totally relate to that too, where your kids are involved in something. I remember I was in a meetup, and one of the dads was talking about, his son, and he tried some sports, and he was horrible at it. And he's like, it was so painful to watch, where he excelled really well at the sport, and then his son tried it and was just horrible. Like, he's like, I mean, he can't. I think he was playing soccer. He's like, he can't even kick the ball. And it's not. I mean, not that the expectation is he has to be excellent at it, but it's like his coordination was horrible. And so you have to either stick with it and realize. But I think when you see your child progress, which I see my kids now, and when they do martial arts or something like that, it is awesome to watch. It really is cool to see that progression. You see them mature even physically and like emotionally and mentally, being able to handle things that they couldn't handle before. Like even handling a loss or handling getting beat, and like how they do that. So you were definitely, involved in, those activities. What about from the academic side in school? Was that a part of, what you remember?
It was less of a part, but we used to go to when the teacher would call for a meeting or whatever, we always went. You
were always involved with that.
Always, both of us were always involved in that, and we were.
So you took an active role in that as well. Yeah.
Now your mother was more into that than I was. I was more on
the
activities, and involved in that. But she wanted to make sure that all of you were doing the best that you could do.
Right.
In what the classes were all about, and they could understand it and help with
being
homework.
A teacher too. She was a teacher by trade. Initially by trade before she became sort of the relationship expert. She was a teacher and a substitute teacher, and I remember being involved with that. So one of the things I wanted to kind of understand too is how we do this podcast and how I'm now living my life of being very conscious about how my actions and what I'm doing and how I'm doing things, sometimes it's a little too much pressure, how it affects my kids. Did you think about that? I didn't say just you, but I would imagine that people in general didn't think about that as much back then, where you weren't as conscious about it.
I was really into what I was getting out of it. They were getting better and doing better, but it was taking a lot of their energy. I mean, they were there for an hour or 2 hours a day,
So it was almost, 7 days you were saying sometimes. Like you felt it was what you were getting out of it versus how are they growing?
I was seeing how good the children were doing, and I was so proud. The fact that they were getting better and better, and I remembered a time later when you actually came up to me and said, "You know what? I'm not really enjoying this." And you were older. You were like
11 or 12.
11 or 12. And I said, "Really? You don't really like it? So what else do you want to do?" And I think you wanted to do,
soccer,
or I think
surf.
But you weren't happy with it. I said, "Well, why didn't you? You haven't been happy for a long time." I said, "Yeah," and I said, "How come you didn't tell me sooner?" He says, "Well, I didn't want to disappoint you."
Oh, wow.
And that really kind of hurt me, because I was, again, seeing the fact that you were doing really well, and I was so proud, but you really didn't like it as much as I thought you did.
Right.
And so I did say, "Hey, look, if you don't want to do it, don't do it."
So what about non sports and things like that, of just like a day-to-day because I know with that, mom was very conscious about, because I think about all the stories we've told on the podcast about, lessons and life lessons and things like that, about how our activity and how what we were saying and what we were doing affects our children, because I think about that now so much. And I know I'm not necessarily the norm. I mean, I'm involved in the podcast, I do speaking, and I do these other things. So I know that I'm really entrenched in that. But I'm trying to understand too, is call it back then, was that even conscious? Were people even conscious of that, of like understanding how much their actions affected the kids?
I just think you just, on a day-to-day basis, you do the best you can. You don't really think about it. At least I didn't.
That's what I mean.
I didn't see a lot of suffering, or that you're having difficulties dealing with the classes or dealing with athletics. And so I was, thinking, wow, they're doing
Smooth
great.
Sailing. Yeah.
Everybody's happy. We're, we're all together. There were a lot of times when, I was just so gung-ho. I was screaming and yelling around the pool. I know your mother was embarrassed that I would say, go, and I would say things like that. And
So
I was so
parent.
into it.
Yeah.
And I knew exactly, like if you were doing a freestyle and you was and your time was 25 seconds, whatever, and then I'd see, oh my God, he did in 24.3. I was just,
but it was really
thrilled.
about you. Yeah, it was really about you.
And I'm doing a great job with having my children do so well. But after a while, I realized that if they didn't. You wanted to go in another direction, and my younger daughter, which is Tiffany, she didn't do as well as her older sister, which is a year older, and she finally got tired of it, and the oldest one continued doing swimming and actually got into
college.
Into college, was able to get into Columbia University because she was a really good swimmer. And that was an amazing thing too. So I looked at that, saying, "Wow, here's someone in our family that's going to go to an Ivy League school."
It was a big deal.
I was so proud of that as well. Right. And she did it for a couple of years, and then she stopped at that as well.
That's great. It's funny because it's giving me insight too. Like, a lot of this I do know, but a lot of it
from a different perspective.
Yeah, it's like from a different perspective.
And I also kind of, just to touch on what you were talking about, were you thinking about how you impact your kid? It's like, well, you just want your kid to do well. Right. It's not overanalyzing it. I think we're in a generation where we start overanalyzing every little thing, and the psychology behind it, and why we do it, self-help, all that stuff comes with it. I think that our parents' generations and the grandparents' generations, they just like, I'm just doing what I think I know and hope the kid does right. And that's what it is.
Well, it's interesting too. So because for Alan, you were raised primarily by your grandfather, or at least for a long time.
Yeah.
Your
my grandparents raised me for a good chunk of time.
So it's interesting to have, because you had that generation directly, and because you're probably identifying with some of the things.
I do.
Of how,
because I know, because from my grandparents' perspective, they just were. They weren't analyzing anything. They just were like, I just want to help you, and I want to make sure that my kids and my grandkids are okay. And that's what they were thinking. And they were proud. When you did something right, they just cheered you on. Yeah, do that. Right. That's all it was. It wasn't thinking about how am I impacting this. They were like, no.
Which is why everybody in this generation's in therapy. They weren't thinking about the impact. But hey, that's okay. That's why we're in business and the podcast is doing well.
I think we overthink it.
Of course.
Yeah, that's what I think.
No, I would love to be able to think less. There's no question. I mean, the idea that every situation is a lesson, and every situation I have to analyze, like, well, what's my best response in this? I mean, it's hard, and it's a lot of pressure, and it doesn't always feel great. It's a lot of work. And then you feel like, okay, well, if something doesn't go right, that's horrible. It's just, there's a lot of that. It takes a step back and kind of saying, like, things are going to be okay.
Yeah.
We turned out okay.
Well, conversely, even as much as you were very proud, you also, if you didn't want to do it, be like, okay, well, you don't want to do it. That's gotta move on. I
finally saw the light that it's not all about me, but it is about how my children feel about themselves.
And that's how you learned yourself that way. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So I want to do some kind of a little bit more analysis, like sort of from a macro level of understanding the times, if you will, and thinking like the difference of being a father back then versus now. Do you think that it is much different? just in general?
I think so. I mean, there wasn't the way I see the world now. Is kids are, they seem to have more issues going on than what we had back then. I mean, it was a very simple world. I mean, we had you
realize it was you guys that caused all the issues. No.
But we had a TV and we had 3 channels.
Right.
Exactly.
And
you didn't have a phone.
Didn't have phones, and we didn't have a lot of
distractions.
Special focus on children that have HD. I mean, that really didn't talk about that. Most of the kids just went on. They did the best they can. Some were A students, some were B and C or D. And that's really all it was. You didn't really say, "Oh, well, this one's having real problems with
see how we can fix it."
Because their hearing isn't right or whatever." They didn't go through that kind of
just
thing.
Gave them a hearing aid and pushed them along. If that.
No,
so there wasn't a lot of thought in it. It just said, what we want to do is obviously get the kids through the school. Move, hopefully they're going to be able to get a job and go through high school and hopefully college. Because I was really focused on all 3 of you, being able to go to college.
Yeah.
Because my father said that the best thing that I could do was also to go to college. And I was not a good student at all, but he really wanted me to go to college because he knew that I.
He didn't, right?
No, he wanted me to go.
Did he go to college?
No, he didn't go to college.
So you were, yeah.
But he wanted me to go because my chances.
Well, that was a ticket out.
My chances of being able to make a better living were improved if I went to college.
Right.
For sure.
Do you think it's harder or easier to be a dad now than it was?
I think it's harder now. Much
You do?
harder. Yeah.
You think that it's harder?
Much harder.
Yeah. Well, the thing you said about the 3 channels on TV, it's way
wasn't
more.
A lot of choice.
Well, no, but that's the point. It's like it was too fragmented now. You can get access to anything from anywhere at any time.
Yeah.
Versus before it was 3 areas with mass media. The rest of it came from your neighborhood and family.
Right.
And that was it.
And if you wanted to buy something, how it's just the idea of having a credit card. That was later on, but to have a credit card didn't make sense to me because if you wanted to buy something and you had a credit card, you should have the money to buy it. If you put it on a credit card and then you can't pay it off right away, I thought that was a terrible thing. So if I wanted to buy like a chair or a table, I'd go and get $5 a week, put it in the bank, and over the course of a year or 2, we'd finally have enough money to be able to buy a sofa.
Yeah, it's interesting how different it is.
It's not that way anymore, and it was so simple because you just.
But you didn't think your life was simple back then.
Well, no. Now you just realize how easy it was compared to now.
Right.
I mean, which is it's so different. It makes it very, very tough for families now.
Yeah. So you have 46 plus years being a father. If you think, 47 maybe 47 years being a father. That's how long he's been a father.
Yeah.
So. Want to ask you some questions about fatherhood and sort of in general. So, what would you say is the most enjoyable thing about being a dad?
I think for me, seeing my children doing well, seeing them able to function in a good manner to be.
As adults,
as children, be able to get by.
So it's that proud feeling.
To not feel like they're, they don't. At least I don't remember any of you really being depressed or really.
You forgot my mid-20s, but
maybe that was. But it was again fairly. For me, I was watching all 3 of you and saying, wow, I think we were really lucky to be able to.
But it wasn't luck.
No,
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
at that time, I thought it was luck.
Right.
That we just lucked out. We had 3 great kids that didn't give us a lot of grief. They listened.
And see now, Alan, would you say, based on all the stuff that we do, is it luck?
No, it's the responsibility and the upbringing that you had.
It's not luck.
Yeah.
And so that's what's interesting is that, people even say, like, when you look at another child or, and you say, and you're like, oh gosh, they got a bad seed, or it's just, that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
but I thought it was,
of course,
luck on our part, because I didn't think of myself as a great father that, was always saying the right thing. I would just try to, my best, but you guys came out all great, and I
there's a couple things you're not aware of.
Well, but for the most part,
no. Yeah.
I look at the 3 of you, and I feel, wow, we really had done a great job.
That's awesome.
We're really
awesome
lucky to have 3 children that haven't, gone through a lot of hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it is a great thing.
What do you think? What areas of fatherhood caused you like the most difficulty or challenged you the most? If you can think about, maybe an area, you said diapers, like you didn't like that, but I mean sort of in general, an area that you often felt challenged or difficult or just wasn't as enjoyable maybe.
Well, we were fairly authoritarian, my wife and myself, so that we wanted the 3 of you to listen to us. And sometimes, especially when you got to teenagers, we said, okay, well, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm going to a friend's house or whatever. And I want you to be home by 9 or something like that. And if you came home at 10 or even 9:30, you would get we weren't very excited about it. He said, look, if we asked you to come.
So that was a difficult thing.
So that was difficult. We
not
wanted that you knew what it was supposed to be, but you didn't take it to heart.
A lot, though.
Yeah,
not with me.
No, maybe not with you, but it was.
I just want all this to be documented that I didn't do it wrong. No.
We wanted all of you to listen to what we had to say because we were concerned that if you stayed out too late, maybe someone would get hurt, or
it's funny. I can say that is probably. I can totally relate because that is probably one of the most frustrating parts about being a parent is when you don't feel like. Especially when you are very sure that you're correct, like that. Like, I want you to be home by this time, and as a parent, knowing more than the child, especially when they're really young, and them not listening to what you're saying.
Right.
And it's not because they want to disobey you there's all kinds of reasons why they would do it. They're not trying to be jerks. They're not trying to offend you. They just might live in the moment. They're not paying attention. There's other people that are doing, I can totally relate to that as like one of the major frustrations. And I'm not even into the teenage years yet.
Yeah.
Where they don't.
With your children.
Yeah, where they don't
because let's face it, teenagers are more difficult to deal with than any.
And now, in this time, yeah.
It's really, once that 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, unbelievable.
Hang on.
It really gets tough. It really does.
What are some things that you, watched your father, because, maybe some of the things that you didn't want to do, what are some of the things or the takeaways you got from watching your father that you then brought into or didn't bring into your parenting? So, the idea of maybe how your father was, that you wanted to make sure you weren't like that, or things that you saw and said, okay, that's a good thing.
Well, I remember my father, he worked, he was in the fur trade in New York City, and he used to come home from work and go right up to the attic and start working for, from 7 o'clock to maybe 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and we never got a chance to even talk to him after he came home. So he was trying to make a living for the family.
That was his contribution.
That was what he was about. He would, so that we could go on a vacation, once a year. My mother.
So you looked at that though as you didn't like that. I mean, you said when I have a child,
I knew why he was doing it, but I didn't like the fact that we didn't have a chance to spend time with him.
So you consciously made that effort to spend that time.
I didn't get the So I didn't get the time to do it, and so when you guys got older, I wanted to make sure that I was available,
right?
And that
and I remember that vividly. I mean, even like after school, there would be a game or something, and I was like, I think about it now. It's like, well, he worked till 5:30, 6 o'clock, but it was 3 o'clock that he was there, or so. So you obviously then either came home from work early or there was things. So yeah, making that effort was a big thing to be present. And certainly I remember that as a child, you know. So when anybody would ask me and say, well, did you have a good relationship? Absolutely. Because of those kinds of things, I remember the presence, like even, as for a man and for the father, that presence was really, really important. Like the fact that you'd look over and see, oh, he's watching me or he's there.
Yeah.
It wasn't the psychological presence. Not that I said, oh, I couldn't talk to him or something, but it's not like we had really deep conversations about life or something like that. But I knew and always felt close because of his presence. Yeah. So that was something that was really valuable, if you will. So it's interesting because you said like your dad didn't do that. He wasn't there.
He wasn't there because he was spending his time trying to make a living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you can't have a close relationship if you don't spend time together.
Yeah. And and the other thing is I remember when the three of you were in college, I don't think we ever worried about what are they doing there? Are they really, are they drinking too much? Are they partying, all the time? We really believed that they were going to.
You had built a good foundation.
They were going to do well, and sure enough, you guys did. Yeah. We didn't have really any problems at all. You guys actually got through it 4 years, and got your degree, and you went on for your master's degree, which was great. And again, we were very, very proud of all of you.
It's cool.
Very good.
So when you think about, and one of the things we talked about on the podcast is legacy. And, the idea of saying, hey, what do I want? What kind of impact do I want to make while I'm here? So that when I'm not here, it lives on. So, what your children and your grandchildren remember about you, so what do you think about? Because you obviously now, I would imagine, start to think about that. It's like, as now having grandkids and such, what are some things that you'd want them to remember about you?
I haven't given that a lot of thought. I think I'm finding that I'm enjoying spending more time, especially with the grandkids, which have never really been easy for me when they've been little. But we were just recently we had a time with your daughter and and I remember having her sitting by me while we were watching TV, and to me I really felt lucky. I just enjoyed her company.
So it's enjoying the time, and then I guess for the kids of just knowing like, hey, they were fun to be around, you know. Is that kind of the...
And when we saw all the, we went, to a big vacation with all 16 of us, including all the grandkids and the family.
Cool.
I mean, we had a.
Are we doing that again?
Well,
I'm up for it.
I'm trying. I'm going to try to be able to do that again.
He's like, hey,
it's expensive.
He's like, I'm going to take you guys to Hawaii and pay. I'm like, sign me up. I'll do that every year if you want to do that. I will make the time.
And it was amazing that all 16 of us
go and
really enjoyed each other's company the whole time. I mean, again, I just look at that as I'm so grateful that the kids actually enjoy each other's company, and all
us
of
as adults enjoy ourselves, and then all our grandkids.
I mean, everybody, your sisters get along with you, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I'm pinching myself all the time, saying, I'm just really lucky.
Well, that's cool.
Just really lucky.
That is great because not a lot of families have that.
Right.
I feel very fortunate that I have a close-knit family. I mean, I don't know that I did that much. I know my wife did more than I did, but I still feel that I'm blessed to be able to have a family that doesn't, they're not drug addicts. They're not, there's no divorces. They're at least not yet. And hopefully there won't be. But, it's nice to know that, that the family is moving in the right direction. They take care of each other, and they're helping other people as well and doing charity work and everything else. So I can't ask for more than what I've got.
Cool.
It's wonderful.
So sort of as a closing closing question, this has been really good. What do you think is the secret, if there is one, to raising good kids? Other than you said being lucky. That's what you said.
I think that
as far as something that you do have impact on.
I think it's important to tell your children daily how special they are, that they're doing things well, they're helping around the house,
it's a positive reinforcement.
They're studying when they need to study, they're helping other people, they're
So for you, it's verbalizing that positivity is really important.
Yeah, I just think that that I can see. I'm not worried about your guys' future. I think that you're going to do the right things, and if you don't, you're doing something that I think that maybe is not appropriate or whatever. Sometimes we go back a few years when there was a lot of reasons to buy houses and that type of thing, and we got a little over the top, where you want to be able to have all these as much stuff out there, but unless it's working for you, you have to.
Well, you're very practical.
And I think I remember saying, it's time for you to sell off some because you're having some problems.
Right.
Monthly.
That wasn't a good year.
Monthly about being able to, to continue working. You're working as hard as you can, but you weren't getting close to, to be able to deal with it all. And you finally took us.
So they never stopped being a parent, is what you. Like
because we knew you were really hurting.
Well, at that time, sure, yeah, there was really time to say, some rough time.
Maybe there's. Something, instead of, I know you want 4 other houses and you want to be able to have all of them doing really well. But, if you can't pay your bills, right. You need to, cut.
And of course, now as then you grow as a man, the last thing you want to do is listen to another person tell you even if it is the correct advice.
But that's one time out of the time that I can remember about you having to actually say something that I thought was going to be helpful to you.
Right.
Otherwise, I don't think there's anything that I needed, I don't think there's another thing that I may have said.
Yeah.
So I feel good about the fact that you finally said,
Took some control.
that it's a good thing to do, and you didn't have to burden yourself with all that debt.
So the secret, wrapping that part up, is the communication,
Right.
And talking with your kids and making sure that, I think, honesty too.
Supportive.
They need to know all of your children and I think need to know how much they are loved.
Right.
Yeah.
If they can all feel that way right now, if you ask them and they say, yeah, my mom and my dad love me,
Right.
and they can all say that, you got it going right for you.
That's good. That's good advice.
That's very good advice.
That is good. That's one to grow on. Make sure we put that in an Instagram post.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us here. That's cool to hear some of that
really
stuff.
Cool.
And the other thing too, we're actually going to record a second podcast tonight because I've got kind of more of a fun episode, and I wanted to get some input with my dad.
Yeah.
So we're going to be going back to back. So you won't see a change of clothes. We'll be wearing the same thing we wore in the previous episode.
Right.
So I just wanted to thank you once again, Alan. Thank you. It's our 100th episode,
100th
which
episode.
I'm pretty proud of. Yeah, pretty proud of that, and a good accomplishment.
Absolutely.
It was a good way to celebrate that. So I appreciate that. And with that,
thank you for thinking about me.
Well,
I like the idea.
It's been a long time. We were thinking about it for a while.
I know.
Now,
We're like, what can we do
here
for the 100?
Yeah, this is great.
No, it turned out good. So I appreciate all the listeners too. And Alan, where can they find us?
As a podcast at dudesadads.com for an email. If you want to go to Twitter at dudesadads, and Facebook, dudesadads.com.
All right.
And then also please subscribe on Stitcher and iTunes. We'd love to get
And we got some
more
YouTube
feedback.
stuff going too.
Yeah, and YouTube as well. So all three of them, you can subscribe and leave some comments.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks again for coming by. Really glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And usually I say see you next week, but we'll see you in about 10 minutes.
All right.
All right. Take
Thanks,
care.
guys.
Bye.
All right.